Okay, so we've defined the characteristics of perfect competition. Perfect competition, you've got many firms, identical products, and no barriers. No barriers to entry or exit from the market. Companies can come and go as they please. Right, and we talked about how the firm operating here would have zero market power. So on our continuum from perfect competition to monopoly, one of the defining things we talked about there was this idea of market power, how there was very little market power for the firm. Here, perfect competition, we might as well say there is no market power. They are price takers. Price taker. Right? So within the market for their product, right? So we're going to have the market for their product. So the price and quantity. In the market, the forces of supply and demand are going to determine the price. And this is chapter 3 stuff again, but we did mention that in the last chapter. So we've got a supply curve here, we've got our demand curve, and we've got an equilibrium price and quantity, right? Okay, so your price and your quantity at equilibrium. Right. And every firm in the market is going to accept this price. The forces of supply and demand may waver that price. The market forces might vary the price, but no individual firm can actually just decide to charge more or less because they'll just be forced out of business. So when we go over to the firm and their costs, right? The quantity produced, and we have our incremented in dollars, either our cost or our revenue, right? So we just scale this Y curve, and so our demand curve is perfectly elastic, and it's right there. Just take the market price, right? And that's going to be equal to the marginal revenue, right? So we can produce as many as we want at the same price. Doesn't matter what our quantity is. The price is never going to change. It's not going to be price dependent. We're going to make our decisions based on other things. But this is also going to be our marginal revenue curve. Every additional product just gets us whatever we're charging on the market. Okay? So that's our marginal revenue curve. And then we said and then we can draw in our other curves, right? We've got our marginal cost curve here. We've got our average total cost curve. Let's say our average total cost curve is here. Average total cost. So the costs come down over a relevant range of production, and then let's also draw in our average variable cost curve. Our average variable cost curve, right? So our average variable cost is going to decline at first, and then start to increase over a range of production, right? So this is the average total cost, the total cost involved in each product, and we said that profit. We were going to use that for profit, is going to be the price times quantity, right? The price times the quantity minus the price or the average total cost times the quantity. The average amount of total cost involved in each unit times the quantity, right? And so what is this going to be? What's our total cost going to be? It's just going to be determined by this, right? We are going to produce at the point where marginal revenue marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. So profit maximization at where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So this is going to be our quantity of production, and of course our price we have no control over whatsoever, right? I tried to draw this so that the bottom is here. So let's just adjust this a little bit, because I'm going to try to make a point about perfect competition. So let's say this is our average total cost curve with the minimum point being right here, right? So if we want to calculate our costs, average total cost times quantity, well, that's going to be this square right here, right? Our total revenue, total revenue or total cost, right? Total revenue is going to be right here times the quantity, price times quantity. And so our profit is going to exist in here. Profit. Okay, so I'm just catching this up. I'm just starting a little bit from what we've already looked at. Now, what we're going to see happen, because we want to look back at the market now, we want to say, okay, well, here, there is a positive profit right here, right? So the total revenue is larger than the total cost, so therefore we do have an economic profit being produced by this individual firm. This is a firm, right? Well, what's going to happen there? Well, go back to this. Because there are no barriers to entry, and also like everyone has perfect information, both buyers and sellers. You remember I talked to you about how consumers have a lot of market power in this economy, in this form of a market of perfect competition, because they all have perfect information. They know what you're charging, and they know what your competitors are charging, and they will go to your competitor if you charge 1 cent more, right? Sellers also have perfect information. What sellers know is that you are making an economic profit. What did we say at the very beginning? One of our principles of economics is that people respond to economic incentives, So what's going to happen here? Well, people are going to see that there is an economic profit involved here, and so more suppliers are going to enter the market because there are no barriers to entry. No barriers. It's fairly cheap to open a business. You can keep going, but blah, 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 blah. Right? So our supply curve moves out like this. Right? Now we have a new equilibrium. This again is chapter 3 stuff. So what's going on? In the market, more suppliers have entered the market. So therefore, right, we've moved from one equilibrium to another. So now we have a new equilibrium price in the market. So, suppliers find this attractive. They want to join. They want to enter the market. And therefore, you're going to have this decline to here, right? So now at this point, we're going to have a price here, right? So our demand curve is going to be right here. Okay, so let's call this D1. It's going to move down, right? So then our marginal revenue is right here, and it's also intersecting with the bottom of our average total cost curve, right? So the point is that at where there is an economic profit to be made, suppliers know about that because other people know about that, and we all know about it because we all have perfect information. So we start entering the market. That puts downward pressure on the price in the market. the individual firm faces its horizontal demand curve. This is the new demand curve right here, right? Produces at the profit maximization point where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. And that also happens to be right at the average total cost curve. So where is our profit? Our cost and our revenue are exactly the same rectangle. So in this example, when once you come down to here, the profit is equal to 0. So that's one very important thing to remember about perfect competition, is it leads to this. But you can also see how it also leads us, and this is why I was very precise about, not very precise, probably less precise than I should be. But if I had been very precise with this, I would have shown how this actually drives the price down to the minimum level of average total cost, right? So then what we call that, producing at the lowest average total cost, is called productive efficiency. Right? So we say that because this competition and this no barrier to entry, the identical nature of products and the many firms, the fact that more people can enter the market until the point where profit is equal to 0, economic profit is equal to 0, the perfectly competitive firm is selling at its price equals marginal cost. Its price and its demand, its price equals its marginal cost and its marginal revenue, and it's producing at the lowest average total cost. So this is called productive efficiency. We say that perfect competition leads to productive efficiency. It leads to everything being produced at the lowest possible average total cost. And we learned about in chapter 7, when you looked at the long run at average total cost, you saw that there was a range of production over which we got economies of scale until we got to the lowest possible long-term average cost. So that's what productive efficiency is. Perfect competition tends to lead to that. One other thing we can observe about perfect competition from this diagram is also that, look at this, it inspires everybody to produce at the equilibrium price and quantity, which is indicated right here. But you can see here that here's your economic surplus, right? All this full triangle is your economic surplus because there's no deadweight loss, right? We're always going to be producing at the price and quantity that clears out the market. So we're going to be maximizing our economic surplus. So maximizing economic surplus is something that we call allocative efficiency. Right? In economic terms. Let's ignore the fact that this economy tends to create scarcity for a lot of people and poverty for a lot of people and a whole lot of wealth for everybody else, and it's still called allocative efficiency. Let's say that the way that a perfectly competitive market works, it drives us to this point where economic surplus is maximized. So that is called allocative efficiency. So you're going to see this in some of your questions. You're going to say, or you might get the question that asks you to explain, why is it that we say a perfectly competitive market is productively efficient and allocatively efficient? Well, the reason we say that is because it drives everything down to the lowest average total cost over time. The long run average total cost is at its minimum, so it's productively efficient, and it leads us to produce at the equilibrium price and quantity dictated by the market. There is no manipulation. to cause deadweight loss. And we're going to see in some of the other forms of market that there can be deadweight loss that is created. Unrealized economic benefit for the society is created by other forms of organization, but a perfectly competitive market, according to this economic theory, because it creates this, maximizes the economic surplus. So therefore, it is allocatively efficient. I'm going to break it there and then see if there's anything else I need to bring up with you.